The night my girlfriend left me, 200 people watched from beneath a ceiling made of imported crystal, and at least 40 of them lifted their phones before she finished saying my name. I had entered the alumni gala carrying a small velvet box and wearing a suit borrowed from my cousin. I left the box unopened because Choi Nayeon arrived holding the arm of Kwon Min-jae, the man everyone believed would inherit Kwanseong Retail. Nayeon and I had dated since our second university year, before either of us knew how expensive adulthood would become. She had studied event management while I studied engineering, and we built our plans around the assumption that effort eventually turned into stability. The assumption weakened each year. My wages stayed flat, and her clients became wealthier. My name was Lee Junho. I was 25, worked nights maintaining refrigeration systems in luxury malls, and had spent 3 years saving enough money to propose to a woman who had already decided poverty was a personality defect. Nayeon did not pull me aside. She stood near the ballroom stage, where the university president had just praised successful young graduates, and said we should end things before I embarrassed both of us with another promise I could not afford. The velvet box in my pocket suddenly felt heavier than every compressor I had carried up a service staircase. Min-jae smiled with the polite sympathy rich men used when they wanted an audience to notice their mercy. The gala had once been our shared milestone. Nayeon had helped organize it and invited me months earlier, promising I would finally meet people who could connect my technical work to serious investors. I had mistaken that invitation for faith in our future. She had already begun seeing Min-jae at planning meetings inside Kwanseong Properties. He said Nayeon had been patient with me. He said ambition without capital was only fantasy. Then he offered to reimburse the price of my dinner because the gala tickets had been expensive. People laughed quietly. Not enough to admit cruelty, but enough to make sure I heard it. Nayeon looked away when I asked whether she had already been dating him. That answer hurt more than anything she could have said. I placed the velvet box on the table between them and told her it no longer belonged to either of us. The hotel engineer later showed me the controller I had stabilized. Its warning history revealed 3 weeks of ignored maintenance requests. Management had delayed replacement because the ballroom could not close during gala season. Even before the system appeared, the night had shown me the same lesson twice. Expensive appearances were often protected by invisible workers absorbing the risk. Min-jae opened it before I reached the exit. Inside was not a diamond. It was a brass key engraved with the words "First Door." Nayeon knew what it meant. Years earlier, when we were students, we had promised that if either of us ever built a real company, the first office would have a door the other person could open. The brass key had cost less than the ring Nayeon once admired, but it represented years of shared plans. I had polished it by hand in Daeho's workshop and intended to place it inside the velvet box before asking her to build that first door with me. Watching Min-jae examine it like a cheap curiosity made the promise feel exposed rather than merely broken. She had forgotten the promise until the room saw it. I walked into the hotel service corridor while applause began behind me for an award Min-jae was receiving on behalf of his family foundation. The corridor lights flickered. The ledger did not look like a game interface. It resembled an auditor's notebook built from shadow and thin white lines. Each entry linked ownership, obligation, evidence, and consequence. When I tried touching it, my fingers passed through, but the information shifted as if it understood what I was afraid to examine. A maintenance alarm sounded somewhere beneath the kitchen. I followed the sound because repairing machines was easier than standing still inside humiliation. A refrigeration controller had overheated beside the banquet storage room. I shut down the damaged circuit, rerouted power, and kept thousands of dollars of food from spoiling before the hotel engineer arrived. He thanked me without knowing I had just been publicly discarded in the room above us. I remembered writing the earliest night glass code beside my father's hospital bed. The ward refrigerator repeatedly failed, forcing nurses to move medicine between floors. I built the prediction model because the repair contractor kept arriving after the temperature had already risen. The first successful test saved 1 cabinet of medication, not an empire. At 11:59 p.m., while I sat alone on the loading dock, my phone displayed a notification that did not belong to any application. Emotional asset liquidation complete. A transparent black ledger unfolded across the air. True value system activated. The system said heartbreak had not created wealth. It had removed a distortion. For 7 years, I had valued myself through the opinion of someone who benefited from my insecurity. Professor Ma had encouraged me to enter the lab through an unpaid internship. He praised my instincts, gave me access to equipment, and gradually placed his name above mine on every presentation. When my father's condition worsened, he offered flexibility in exchange for signing routine administrative forms. I had trusted kindness offered at the exact moment I was weakest. That valuation had collapsed. The system offered one emergency audit before midnight. It could not create property, forge ownership, or transfer another person's legal rights to me. It could reveal assets I already possessed, claims I had failed to enforce, and obligations hidden from ordinary records. I thought stress had finally damaged my mind. Then the ledger displayed a name I had not seen in 4 years. Erin had been the only student who questioned the ownership paperwork. She had circled missing definitions and told me never to sign a document that referred to another document I had not received. I accused her of distrusting everyone. She replied that trust was not improved by refusing to keep copies. Night glass thermal systems. In university, I had built software that reduced energy waste in commercial refrigeration by predicting how cold air moved through crowded buildings. The prototype used cheap sensors, old maintenance logs, and a model I trained on supermarket failures. My professor called it academically interesting and commercially useless. 6 months later, a startup called Nightglass licensed a nearly identical model to shopping centers across Asia. I had tried to challenge them. The storage locker was across the city. I rode a night bus while Erin remained on video, forcing me to describe every step so the evidence chain could later be verified. My hands shook when the bus stopped at red lights. The system counted down without emotion, turning every ordinary delay into a threat. Their lawyers produced an internship agreement claiming everything I designed belonged to the university lab. I lacked money, proof, and the confidence to fight institutions that spoke in letterhead. The True Value system displayed the agreement beside a second document. A forgotten university intellectual property policy stated that student inventions created outside funded laboratory hours remained the student's property unless 3 specific assignment forms were signed. One of my forms had a signature. The signature was not mine. Sora had spent years pretending my financial problems did not frighten her. She worked nights while attending college in the morning and rejected every attempt I made to help with tuition. Her 40,000 won represented half a week of meals. The transfer arrived with a message telling me that if this was a scam, she would personally make it educational. Sora remained on the phone until the filing confirmation appeared. She did not understand escrow clauses or patent ownership, yet she understood the sound of my breathing when the deadline passed. Before hanging up, she said that whatever happened next, I was forbidden from turning one lucky discovery into proof that I had never needed anyone. A timestamp showed the form had been uploaded while I was attending my father's memorial outside Seoul. The system highlighted a clause in Nightglass's acquisition agreement. If the software's original ownership was successfully challenged before midnight, 42% of the acquiring company's shares would enter escrow for the rightful creator. The deadline was 11 minutes away. The acquiring company was Heliox Global Infrastructure. Heliox operated cold storage ports, pharmaceutical warehouses, data centers, and refrigerated transport networks in 23 countries. Its market value was nearly 4 trillion won. 42% of the Korean subsidiary was worth more than 1 trillion. At sunrise, reporters gathered outside Daeho's workshop before I understood how they had found me. Daeho lowered the metal shutter and shouted that anyone damaging his sign would be billed at celebrity rates. Inside, the 3 of us watched my name appear beside numbers large enough to feel unrelated to human life. I had 11 minutes to prove a signature was false. The system showed no magical button. It showed evidence locations. The original assignment form remained inside a university archive server. My old laptop contained device logs proving I had never opened the document. A campus security backup showed the professor entering the lab after midnight using another researcher's card. I called my university friend Han Aaron, who had become a forensic accountant after graduating near the top of our class. She answered on the 5th ring and asked whether someone was in immediate danger. The court order was temporary, not victory. Heliox could challenge authorship, Nightglass could claim independent development, and the university could bury us in procedure. Erin wrote those possibilities on a whiteboard beside the trillion-won valuation. She made me read the risks aloud before allowing Daeho to open celebratory instant coffee. I said my future might be, and I needed her to witness a digital filing before midnight. Erin had not spoken to me in 2 years, but she trusted panic less than evidence. She opened a secure video call, watched me retrieve the old laptop from a storage locker, and verified the system logs. I submitted an emergency ownership notice through the acquisition escrow portal at 11:57 p.m. The portal required a filing fee of 120,000 won. My bank account contained 83,400. I called my younger sister, Lee Sora, who worked overnight at a convenience store. She transferred 40,000 won without asking why. Minji's financial ledger fascinated me because every visible object had a hidden owner. The sports car belonged to a leasing company. His apartment was pledged to 2 lenders. His foundation gala had been paid with a short-term loan secured against donations not yet received. Even his reputation functioned like rented property, requiring constant renewal. The filing completed at 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 42 seconds. The transparent ledger changed. Claim preserved. Reality adjustment pending. I slept for 3 hours on Daeho's workshop sofa because going home felt impossible. At 4:12 a.m., Erin called again. She had examined Heliox's acquisition filings. Nightglass had already admitted internally that the ownership documents were questionable. I wanted to send Nayeon a screenshot of the negative net worth. The system darkened before I completed the thought. It did not prohibit anger, but it refused to become a weapon for private humiliation. I deleted the message and understood that sudden wealth had not made me emotionally mature. It had only made immaturity more dangerous. Heliox had placed the shares in escrow because its insurers refused to cover the risk. Nobody had informed me because everyone expected the deadline to pass. At 7:30 a.m., a Seoul commercial court issued a temporary recognition order. At 8:05, Heliox's board disclosed that 42% of its Korean infrastructure subsidiary was subject to my ownership claim. At 8:11, business channels began repeating my name. At 8:20, my claim was valued at 1.36 trillion won. I had become a billionaire overnight without receiving a single won in cash. The first message I sent was not to Nayeon. Erin proposed that First Door should eventually operate under rules stricter than the system. Supernatural information could disappear or become corrupted by my interpretation. Every decision therefore required ordinary evidence strong enough to survive public review. If the ledger revealed something we could not verify legally, we would treat it as a lead rather than a fact. I sent Sora her 40,000 won back with interest. She returned the interest and told me not to become annoying. The second message came from Nayeon. She asked whether the news was real. Before I answered, Minjae called. He congratulated me as if we had shared a joke at the gala. He said Kwanseong Retail had worked with Heliox for years and offered to introduce me to professionals who could help manage sudden wealth. The system opened another ledger beside his name. Professor Ma arrived at mediation with university officials who still called me a former student instead of an inventor. He attempted to describe the dispute as a misunderstanding between generations. Professor Ma's defense relied on making my work sound unfinished. He displayed early diagrams full of errors and implied Nightglass had transformed an amateur idea into a commercial product. Erin answered by tracing every later improvement back to functions already present in my source code. Innovation could evolve, she said, without changing who created the foundation others monetized. Erin interrupted and asked whether misunderstandings usually produced secret equity, consulting fees, and a forged upload. The room became quieter each time she replaced his language with a number. Kwon Minji. Publicly estimated net worth, 380 billion won. Verifiable personal net worth, -6.2 billion won. Family-controlled assets, pledged 143%. Available liquid cash, 17.4 million won. Leased vehicles, 4. Borrowed watch, 1. Unpaid hotel account, 11 weeks. The rich boy who had taken my girlfriend could not afford the ballroom, where he humiliated me. Heliox's Korean subsidiary was more complicated than the valuation suggested. It owned profitable warehouses, but also inherited aging equipment, union disputes, and environmental commitments. Accepting the shares meant responsibility for problems nobody included in headlines. I signed only after worker representatives received access to the same operational data offered to me. I almost laughed. The system warned me. False value exposed does not become your value. It had 3 permanent rules. First, I could reveal hidden ownership and liabilities only when I possessed lawful access or evidence. Second, any wealth gained through deception, coercion, or manufactured panic would be frozen. Third, using the ledger to purchase loyalty from someone who had rejected me would permanently close the system. Revenge was allowed only if I could survive without needing it. For several weeks, I remained legally wealthy and practically broke. Banks wanted collateral documents that courts had not finalized. Luxury brands offered free products, yet my landlord still expected rent by Friday. I rejected the products and accepted another short loan from Sora, who began recording each transfer under a spreadsheet titled Billionaire Maintenance Expenses. I ignored Minji's offer and asked Erin to meet me at the workshop. She arrived wearing a gray suit, carrying 3 folders, and looking exactly as unimpressed as she had in university. Erin had once helped me prepare the first night glass patent draft. She had also warned me not to trust Professor Ma. I had ignored her because Professor Ma praised me at a time when my father was ill and I desperately needed an adult to believe in me. Erin did not say she had been right. She placed the evidence folders on Daeho's workbench and said a $1 trillion claim attracted people faster than smoke attracted alarms. Heliox wanted a private settlement. Erin mapped Kwanseong's circular financing across a wall of printed company charts. One subsidiary borrowed money to purchase services from another, which used the revenue to borrow from a third. The group looked active because money moved constantly. In reality, the same borrowed value traveled in circles while interest accumulated outside the loop. The university wanted silence. Nightglass executives wanted to argue that my code had changed too much to remain mine. My professor wanted to meet before lawyers became involved. Nayeon wanted to know whether I had hidden my wealth from her. That question almost ended my remaining respect for her. I had not been secretly wealthy while asking her to share cheap meals and long bus rides. I had been poor because someone stole the only asset I created. Her message transformed my past struggle into evidence against me. The Kwanseong mission forced me to confront an uncomfortable fact. Exposing Minjae immediately would satisfy my pride and destroy people who had never laughed at the gala. The system's reward depended on recovered value, not punishment. It was asking whether I could separate justice from the desire to watch someone regret choosing against me. I replied that I had learned about the claim after she left. She sent no response for 6 hours. Heliox's settlement team arrived first. They offered 180 billion won in cash for the entire claim. The number was large enough to end every problem I had ever understood. Erin asked what happened if Heliox lost access to my software model. Their lawyers said the company would continue operations under temporary licenses. The system displayed another hidden connection. First Door's first office contained water stains, 2 folding desks, and a meeting table Daeho built from an old sound cabinet. Reporters expected a Billionaire headquarters and assumed the workshop was temporary theater. We stayed because the rent was honest, the coffee was terrible, and nobody there confused polished marble with competence. Nightglass's model controlled energy optimization across 81 Heliox cold storage facilities. Removing it would increase operating costs by nearly 200 billion won per year. The company was offering less than 1 year of saved electricity for permanent control. I rejected the settlement. Heliox doubled it. I rejected it again. The lead negotiator stopped smiling. He asked whether I understood liquidity risk. Crown Meridian's service crew included technicians who had trained me when I first arrived. They knew which pumps vibrated before failure, which restaurants overloaded circuits, and which executives entered through service corridors to avoid complaints. One senior technician, Park Myongo, showed me a handwritten notebook containing 12 years of failures and temporary fixes. Management had never digitized it because the notebook was considered informal. The system valued its practical knowledge at more than several consulting reports combined. Myongo agreed to share it only after technicians received ownership over the maintenance data they produced. No consultant report contained that knowledge because nobody had asked the people carrying tools. I said I understood being told something worthless became valuable only after another person owned it. Aaron looked at me differently after that. The court ordered mediation. Professor Ma entered wearing the same brown glasses he had worn when he told me the prototype was useless. He said he had protected the invention from my immaturity. He claimed I would have sold it cheaply to pay medical bills. I asked whether stealing from a poor student became protection if the thief invested well. He said institutions sometimes made decisions individuals could not understand. The underground thermal network had been built during the mall's original construction, then forgotten as departments changed. Restaurants expelled heat, while nearby apartments paid separately for heating. Refrigeration units fought warm air released by data rooms. The building wasted energy because each tenant optimized its own meter instead of the shared system beneath them. The True Value system displayed his personal ledger. He owned 12% of Night Glass through accounts registered to his brother-in-law. He had received consulting fees from every Heliox expansion using my model. His hidden earnings exceeded 9 billion won. I did not reveal the ledger. Instead, Aaron used bank transfers, board minutes, and patent emails to prove the same thing without magic. The university suspended him before mediation ended. Heliox then offered me 42% of the Korean subsidiary, recognition as original creator, and a 10-year licensing royalty. Our performance contract terrified Kwanseong's lawyers because payment depended on measurements they could not control. We installed independent meters and allowed vendors to nominate auditors. If savings failed, First Door would absorb the cost. If they succeeded, the benefit would be divided according to a formula visible before any work began. The shares carried voting rights, but could not be sold for 2 years. My paper net worth rose to 1.64 trillion won after the announcement. I still borrowed subway fare from Sora because every account connected to the claim remained under compliance review. She took a photograph of me standing beneath a headline calling me Korea's newest billionaire while my transit card displayed insufficient balance. People called me the broke billionaire. For the first time, I laughed at a name strangers gave me. Min-jae appeared on television the same afternoon. Nayeon's new title sounded impressive until she described the job. She arranged charity dinners, prepared Min-jae's speeches, and found attractive small businesses to feature in publicity campaigns. Every event displayed generosity funded by invoices the same vendors waited months to receive. She had become part of the machine that once impressed her. He said he admired self-made innovation and suggested Kwanseong Retail might partner with Heliox Korea. The system marked the statement as financially desperate. Kwanseong's department stores had borrowed against future rent, warehouse inventory, loyalty program deposits, and even renovation refunds. The family had hidden losses through circular sales between subsidiaries. Their flagship luxury mall was 30 days from violating loan conditions. Min-jae needed my new company to sign a logistics contract large enough to convince lenders Kwanseong still had strategic value. Nayeon had not left me for a rich man. She had left me for a presentation. Our first private conversation after the breakup took place in an empty loading bay. Nayeon looked at my technician jacket and said it was strange seeing news channels call me powerful while I still dressed the same. I answered that changing clothes before changing responsibilities would only make me resemble the man she had chosen. Aaron warned me not to enjoy the discovery too much. She said false wealth collapsing could still crush employees, suppliers, and customers who never attended the gala. The system assigned my first active mission. Identify the true owner of Kwanseong's value before its false owner destroys it. Reward: permanent voting control over Heliox Korea if recovered value exceeded 1 trillion won. Failure: my shares would remain, but the system would close. I asked why the system cared about Kwanseong. It answered with one sentence. Aaron interviewed Nayeon for 6 hours before accepting any record. She separated what Nayeon knew, what she suspected, and what she had signed without reading. By midnight, Nayeon had stopped defending herself with the phrase "I didn't understand." Aaron told her understanding usually arrived after damage because powerful organizations rewarded people for not asking earlier. False valuation is most dangerous when everyone depends on it. Kwanseong employed 12,000 people and owed money to 27,000 small vendors. If the group collapsed suddenly, Min-jae's humiliation would become a national employment problem. I formed a temporary holding company called First Door Capital. Sora mocked the name until I explained the brass key. She stopped laughing and asked whether I still wanted Neon back. Naming the company First Door forced me to admit the key still mattered. Aaron suggested a neutral corporate name that would not connect investments to a failed relationship. I kept mine because I did not want humiliation to own the symbol forever. A closed plan could become the entrance to something neither Neon nor I had originally imagined. I said no too quickly. Aaron heard me and wrote emotionally unresolved beside my name on a risk sheet. The valuation inspection became the first time lenders entered Crown Meridian through the service entrance. They passed leaking pipes, stacked vendor boxes, and a break room with 3 broken chairs. Upstairs, the marble floors still shone. Downstairs, the people maintaining that shine had been asked to delay overtime claims until the next quarter. First Door had no office. We rented 2 rooms above Daeho's repair shop. Daeho became technology director because he understood industrial controllers and distrusted titles. Aaron became chief audit officer on the condition that she could publish objections to my decisions. Sora became the first person authorized to tell me when I sounded like an idiot. She demanded no salary for this service because she considered it recreation. Our first investigation focused on Kwanseong's luxury mall, Crown Meridian. I had maintained its refrigeration systems for 2 years. When Chairman Kwan overruled Min Jae, nobody celebrated. The old man had not suddenly chosen honesty. He had calculated that refusing the upgrade threatened the lenders more than accepting outside control threatened his pride. Aaron reminded us that useful decisions did not require pure motives, but they did require enforceable limits. The building looked profitable because every floor was full of light. The service corridors told a different story. Repairs were delayed. Night workers reused damaged tools. Vendors paid marketing fees for promotions that never occurred. Energy bills increased while executives announced sustainability awards. The system revealed that the mall's true value did not come from luxury stores. It came from an underground thermal network connecting refrigeration, data rooms, restaurants, and nearby apartment heating. The midnight upgrade operated like surgery on a building that could not sleep. Crews replaced sensors floor by floor, rerouted chilled water, and tested restaurant storage before dawn deliveries. I spent 3 nights inside the control room, watching energy lines gradually stop fighting each other. The first stable graph felt more luxurious than anything in the mall. My night glass model could reduce the network's cost by 38%. Kwanseong had never upgraded it because the capital budget had been diverted to maintaining Minji's family image. Aaron found invoices for yacht events, overseas residences, borrowed art, and fake consulting projects. The total exceeded the cost of modernizing all 16 Kwanseong malls. We offered Crown Meridian a performance contract. First Door would pay for the upgrade. The mall would repay us only from verified energy savings. Employees and vendors would receive part of the savings through a stability fund. The stability fund changed relationships faster than our technology. Vendors who had hidden problems from Kwanseong began reporting them because savings increased when waste was documented. Employees suggested repairs managers had postponed for years. The project worked not because I possessed a system, but because people finally benefited from telling the truth. Min Jae rejected the offer. He said allowing me inside Kwanseong's infrastructure would make the company look weak. I reminded him the company was already weak. He replied that perception determined whether weakness mattered. That belief had kept him rich for years. It was also about to destroy him. Neon contacted me privately. She now worked as Kwanseong Foundation's event strategy director. Min Jae presented Kwanseong Nova inside a digital theater where impossible towers rose from projected water. Influencers praised views from apartments that had no permits. Reservation agents distributed priority forms before prices were approved. Every detail was designed to create fear of missing an opportunity that did not yet exist. Min Jae had given her the title 2 days after the gala. Her salary had not arrived. The luxury apartment, he promised, remained registered to a lender. The company card stopped working at restaurants outside Kwanseong properties. She asked whether the system had shown me his bankruptcy. I asked how she knew about the system. She said Min Jae had people monitoring everyone around me. One of them had photographed the strange screens reflected in Daeho's workshop window. Aaron made us model the consequences of an immediate expose. Refund requests would exceed available cash within hours. Construction firms would stop paying crews. Local banks would freeze unrelated loans because Kwanseong guarantees connected them. Revenge required one sentence. A responsible exit required an entire replacement economy. The screens could not be photographed directly, but their light had appeared. I told her Min Jae was not simply low on cash. His entire lifestyle depended on lenders believing another lender would continue first. Nayeon became quiet. Then she asked whether I was telling her because I still cared. I said I was telling her because employees deserved warning, and she now had access to information that could protect them. She hated that answer because it contained no romance. She also understood it. Nayeon also warned me that Min Jae was planning to announce a partnership before Heliox approved anything. He intended to use my silence as implied consent. We issued a short factual notice denying negotiations without mentioning his bankruptcy. The correction damaged his plan more effectively than an insult because lenders understood exactly why he had needed the appearance of my support. Nova Ground was developed at tables inside the freight yard rather than a luxury studio. Truck drivers marked turning problems on maps. Market owners identified cold storage needs. Residents demanded schools before premium towers. Each suggestion made the project less impressive in advertisements and more likely to function after the cameras left. Nayeon gave Aaron access to foundation procurement records. The records showed Minji's family had shifted mall revenue into a cultural foundation. The foundation purchased art from friendly dealers at inflated prices. The dealers returned part of the money through consulting contracts. The scheme created fake assets and real cash for the family. Nayeon had signed several event approvals without knowing their purpose. Aaron warned her that ignorance would not erase responsibility. Nayeon agreed to testify if employees and junior staff received legal protection. Sora's deposit dashboard used simple symbols because she distrusted financial language that made ordinary people feel unqualified. Every family could see whether money remained in escrow, entered construction, or returned as a refund. Developers complained the display exposed too much uncertainty. Sora answered that uncertainty existed whether customers were allowed to see it or not. I asked whether Min Jae had pressured her. She said he had never needed to. He simply made wealth look like safety and allowed her to choose the picture. That honesty was the first thing she had given me since the breakup. Crown Meridian's lenders scheduled an emergency valuation inspection. Min Jae planned to fill empty stores with temporary inventory, hired customers, and borrowed luxury cars. He wanted the mall to look successful for one day. I proposed something more dangerous. Chairman Kwan's visit revealed how thoroughly bankruptcy had separated him from normal life. He did not know the workshop's vending machine required coins. He stared at the plastic chair before sitting as though poverty might transfer through contact. Daeho charged him for coffee and issued a handwritten receipt. We would reveal the true operating business beneath the luxury performance. Employees opened the underground service levels to inspectors. Restaurant owners showed real sales. Maintenance teams demonstrated the neglected thermal network. Small vendors displayed unpaid invoices. Apartment representatives explained how the mall's waste heat could reduce neighborhood energy costs. The inspection began as an attempt to preserve Kwanseong's false valuation. It ended with lenders discovering a better company hidden underneath it. Dongsik described his first store, a narrow fabric shop built before Kwanseong became a national brand. In those years, suppliers knew the family personally and losses could not be hidden behind subsidiaries. Growth had increased distance faster than responsibility. Eventually, reputation became an asset nobody inside the family remembered earning. The mall itself was worth saving. The controlling family was not. The lenders agreed to pause foreclosure if management accepted independent control and the first door upgrade. Min Jae refused again. His father, Chairman Kwan Dongsik, overruled him. For the first time, Minji's own family treated him as a liability. The upgrade began at midnight while the mall remained open. Daeho coordinated sensors. The private control offer tempted me because it resembled justice arranged around my pain. The man who mocked me would lose his inheritance, and I would occupy the position he believed birth guaranteed. Aaron asked whether I wanted to repair Kwanseong or win the gala several months late. I rejected the offer after realizing the difference. I worked beside technicians who had once reported to me as a contractor. Aaron tracked every payment publicly. Nayeon organized vendor access and refused to place her name on promotional materials. Within 6 weeks, energy costs fell 29%. The Stability Fund paid overdue vendor balances and prevented 400 layoffs. First Door's performance rights became worth 210 billion won. The system credited the recovered value toward my mission. Min-jae responded by announcing a new luxury city project called Kwanseong Nova. Nayeon's press conference was not coordinated with First Door. Mira, the Supplier Association's attorney, informed us minutes before it began. Nayeon wore a plain dark suit without Kwanseong jewelry and carried no prepared sympathy story. She admitted exactly where ambition had narrowed her judgment and refused to describe herself as another victim of Minji's image. He claimed foreign investors had committed 2 trillion won. The presentation included towers, artificial lakes, private clinics, and a floating hotel. The system valued confirmed investment at 0. The foreign consortium existed. Its commitment did not. Min-jae had received a non-binding letter from a small advisory firm and presented it as funded capital. He planned to collect reservation deposits from apartment buyers before lenders verified the project. Those deposits would temporarily cover Kwanseong's debt. After losing the apartment, Nayeon spent her first night in the whistleblower studio, sitting among unopened boxes. She later told Aaron the room felt safer than Minji's penthouse because nothing inside depended on pretending. The next morning, she returned the designer clothes his company had purchased and kept only her own notebooks. If the project failed, thousands of families would lose savings. I wanted to expose him immediately. Aaron made me wait through an entire night before releasing the alternative project. She wanted every deposit route, construction milestone, and refund trigger tested by outside lawyers. I accused her of moving too slowly while families remained exposed. She replied that urgency had already been Minji's excuse for asking people to trust plans that did not exist. Aaron stopped me. A public accusation without a safe exit would cause depositors to rush for refunds, pushing Kwanseong into the collapse we were trying to avoid. We needed to replace the false project before removing it. The system revealed an abandoned alternative. The Nova site contained a closed freight yard, 6 empty warehouses, and access to 3 subway lines. It was terrible land for artificial lakes. The refund operation required hundreds of individual confirmations. Families had paid through cards, bank transfers, and loans from different institutions. First Door employees worked beside community volunteers to trace each deposit. We prioritized people who had borrowed against homes, even though financial models said larger investors should be processed first. It was perfect for urban cold chain distribution, small manufacturer workshops, and affordable worker housing. We built a competing plan called Nova Ground. No floating hotel, no private island, no celebrity architects. The plan used existing structures, neighborhood ownership, transparent deposits, and Heliox's logistics network. Sora designed a public dashboard that showed exactly where reservation money would remain. Local business owners could invest small amounts without surrendering their shops. Minji's fake engagement story failed because the shipping attorney released her conference schedule, yacht charter invoice, and messages where his assistant requested romantic-looking photographs. She did not expose him for entertainment. She corrected the record to protect her professional reputation. The public supplied the entertainment without assistance. Kwanseong employees could convert unpaid bonuses into protected shares if they chose. The project looked boring beside Minji's fantasy. It was also real. Chairman Kwon secretly asked to meet me. He arrived at Daeho's workshop without security. The richest-looking bankrupt man in Korea sat on a plastic chair beneath a broken speaker and admitted his family had less than 60 days. He said Min-jae had grown up believing image protected value because image had protected them for decades. Banks extended loans when the family appeared strong. The pension trust became the clearest example of hidden ownership. Workers saw deductions on pay slips, but received no meaningful statements. Management treated the accumulated shares as obedient votes while calling the arrangement employee welfare. Retired staff believed they owned part of Kwanseong, yet none had ever chosen a representative. Suppliers waited when newspapers praised them. Politicians answered calls when photographs showed crowded stores. Dong-sik had taught his son that truth was a cost paid only after cheaper options failed. He offered me voting control of Kwanseong, if I protected the family name. The system displayed a possible reward worth 1.8 trillion won. Accepting would make me richer immediately. It would also preserve the same hidden liabilities under a new owner. I rejected the private deal. Warehouse supervisor Kim Jae-suk brought 27 years of pay records to court in a plastic grocery bag. He had kept them because his father taught him never to discard proof of work. The employees, vendors, lenders, and customers would see the real numbers. The family would lose control before asking others to absorb losses. Chairman Kwon called the terms humiliating. I told him public embarrassment was not the worst consequence of false wealth. I had learned that personally. He left without agreement. The following morning, Min Jae leaked photographs of Nayeon entering Daeho's workshop. When employees elected their temporary representatives, turnout exceeded every shareholder meeting Kwon Seong had ever held. Night crews voted after shifts. Retirees arrived by bus. Store clerks brought children because they could not find childcare. The family had spent decades claiming workers lacked interest in governance. The truth was that nobody had offered a real vote. He accused her of sharing corporate secrets with her former boyfriend. The media returned to the breakup story because romance was easier to understand than insolvency. Nayeon's face appeared beside mine on every channel. Commentators asked whether she regretted choosing the wrong man. She did not answer that question. At a press conference, she admitted helping First Door investigate vendor payments. She said she had chosen Min Jae because she confused displayed wealth with stability. She said discovering his bankruptcy did not make her return to the man she had hurt. The revenge option was the first time the system offered something with no productive value. Publishing Minji's ledger would recover nothing, protect nobody, and teach no structure to function better. It existed because the system recognized my desire as a form of demand. Declining it became more important than every profitable decision before it. It made her responsible for correcting work she had helped legitimize. The statement surprised everyone, including me. Min Jae fired her publicly. Her company apartment locked before she returned. Her office belongings arrived in cardboard boxes. I offered her temporary housing through a legal support program created for whistleblowers. I made sure Aaron delivered the offer. The system remained open. Minji's visit after closing did not end with friendship. Nayeon's legal support did not protect her from social consequences. Former friends stopped calling. Event companies treated her as a source of scandal, and online strangers described every decision as proof she had chosen whichever man appeared richer. She continued because suppliers she had once placed in promotional videos now knew her actual name and expected her to answer for the contracts behind them. He remained defensive, proud, and convinced that my success had benefited from impossible luck. I agreed. Luck had opened evidence I might never have found. But every lie he continued after knowing the truth belonged entirely to him. Nayeon accepted a small studio and began working with vendor representatives. She never asked me for money. I never offered forgiveness as salary. Nova Ground attracted hospitals, food cooperatives, online retailers, and 3 pension funds. The commitments became binding after neighborhood councils approved the land plan. Their total exceeded 1 trillion won. Minji's fake project lost credibility. Apartment buyers demanded their reservation deposits back. Restructuring stripped Min Jae of assistants, accounts, and invitations within days. People who once waited outside his office stopped answering calls. He discovered that many relationships had belonged to Kwon Seong's credit rating rather than to him. The experience did not make him kind. It made it harder for him to confuse attention with loyalty. Because we had prepared replacement financing, First Door purchased the deposit obligations at full value. Families received refunds without triggering immediate collapse. In exchange, Kwon Seong transferred the freight yard and warehouses into Nova Ground. The system credited another 730 billion won of recovered value. I was close to completing the mission. Min Jae had one remaining asset, public belief. He announced his engagement to the daughter of a Singapore shipping magnate. Photographs showed them aboard a yacht in Busan. Meridian Cooperative Retail kept the recognizable mall spaces, but changed who controlled leases and marketing fees. Vendors elected regional councils. Employees received profit units tied to stores they actually operated. First Door owned the thermal infrastructure underneath, creating a deliberate boundary between essential systems and commercial decisions. The yacht belonged to Heliox. The woman was a corporate restructuring attorney attending a port conference. She threatened legal action within hours. The story became a national joke. Kwanseong's bonds fell anyway. Humiliation did not pay suppliers. The board scheduled a vote to enter court-managed restructuring. Min-jae planned to stop it by using employee pension shares registered under a family trustee. Sora's board observer role was supposed to last 6 months. She spent the first meeting asking why employee cafeterias purchased expensive bottled water from a director's cousin. By the third meeting, the contract had been canceled. Workers then petitioned to keep her, claiming fearlessness was cheaper than another consulting review. The shares legally belonged to workers, but the trustee agreement allowed management to vote them. The system identified the final hidden owner. Kwanseong employees had unknowingly financed the family's control through pension deductions. Recovering those voting rights would complete my mission. Aaron found the trust documents. Daeho traced payroll records. Sora interviewed retired workers who remembered being promised representation. Nayeon located an old foundation video where Chairman Kwon publicly described the pension trust as employee-owned. Returning the brass key allowed Nayeon and me to end a story neither of us should continue performing. I had imagined that one day she would regret leaving and ask to share my success. When the moment finally arrived, I wanted neither victory nor reunion. I wanted the past to stop negotiating with the present. The statement was not legally binding. It proved intent. We filed for an emergency injunction before the restructuring vote. Min-jae appeared in court wearing a watch worth more than his verified cash. He argued that employees had trusted the family to vote responsibly. A warehouse supervisor named Kim Jae-suk testified that trust without information was only dependence. The court suspended the trustees' voting authority. Employees elected temporary representatives that afternoon. Aaron and I avoided romance partly because First Door depended on her independence. She insisted that attraction could not weaken her authority to challenge me. We created disclosure rules before our first date and assigned another audit partner to review decisions involving her work. Daeho called it the least romantic courtship in Seoul. The board approved restructuring by a narrow margin. The Kwon family lost control of Kwanseong Retail. The True Value system displayed the result. Recovered value, 1.12 trillion won. Mission complete. Heliox Korea's remaining voting shares transferred into my name under the original system reward. My combined net worth exceeded 3.4 trillion won. I had become richer than Kwanseong ever truly was. At the soup restaurant, Erin admitted she had once liked me in university. She had hidden it after watching me build every plan around Nayeon. I asked why she helped with the midnight filing despite years of distance. She said evidence deserved protection even when the person carrying it had made disappointing choices. The system offered a final revenge option. For 100 clarity points, it would publish Minji's full personal ledger to every financial institution and news outlet. His debts, leased cars, borrowed watch, hotel bills, private messages, and fake engagement plan would become public at once. My finger remained above the confirmation while the ledger previewed tomorrow's headlines. I saw Min-jae reduced to a collection of borrowed objects, exactly as he had reduced me to an empty bank account at the gala. The symmetry felt satisfying until I recognized that copying his method would make humiliation our only shared language. I selected the option. Then I stopped before confirming. Min-jae deserved consequences. Hotel workers did not deserve to be remembered through his unpaid rooms. Drivers did not deserve to be mocked because his cars were leased. As First Door expanded, I stopped approving investments alone. Regional committees could reject projects even when the system marked them valuable. Some opportunities promised profit by replacing hundreds of workers too quickly. Others depended on communities accepting environmental risks hidden beneath national benefits. A true asset could still be the wrong acquisition. Nayeon did not deserve another public spectacle designed around my pain. I canceled the publication. The system returned the points. Value does not increase when humiliation changes owners. Min-jae learned about the canceled option from Chairman Kwon, who had begun cooperating with investigators. He came to see me at Crown Meridian after closing time. Without cameras, assistants, or borrowed jewelry, he looked younger and more exhausted. He asked why I had not destroyed him. The Student Invention Office handled its first dispute within months. A research team accused a professor of claiming ownership over a medical sensor. This time, the students had independent lawyers and access logs before negotiations began. The case settled without becoming another stolen career, proving reform mattered most when my name was absent. I said bankruptcy was not a moral crime. Lying to make others carry it was. He said I had no idea what it was like to inherit a collapsing name. I said he had no idea what it was like to be publicly measured by that name. For once, neither of us had a clever answer. Min-jae entered the restructuring process as a debtor rather than an heir. He sold his remaining personal assets, including the only car he actually owned. The vehicle was 6 years old and worth less than the rented sports cars in his photographs. Minji's analyst job required him to prepare reports senior managers could reject without explanation. He once sent me a spreadsheet showing a warehouse company hiding repair costs. I forwarded it to the proper review team without promising him credit. Months later, the company corrected the records and listed him among the analysts who found the issue. He used the money to repay unpaid staff first. Some people called it redemption. Erin called it the minimum. I agreed with her. First Door became the controlling investor in Heliox Korea, Nova Ground, and the restructured thermal networks inside Kwanseong's surviving malls. We refused to buy the department store brand. Employees and vendors formed a new company called Meridian Cooperative Retail. First Door provided infrastructure and financing without owning a majority. Nayeon's marriage invitation arrived without expensive paper or family branding. She wrote a short note saying she hoped the ordinary design would not disappoint my billionaire standards. Erin read it, laughed, and selected the cheapest gift on the registry. The relationship between us had become civil because nobody needed it to prove anything. Sora became its youngest board observer after insisting that convenience store workers understood customers better than luxury consultants. She was right often enough to become unbearable. Nayeon declined a leadership role. She said she had spent too many years choosing rooms by how they looked from outside. She joined an independent supplier association and worked on transparent event contracts. A year after the breakup, we met at the same hotel ballroom. This time, she was organizing a vendor rights conference. I was speaking about infrastructure valuation. Nova Ground's central market included a public maintenance gallery where visitors could see pumps, cooling pipes, and energy controls behind glass. Children pressed buttons on educational displays while technicians explained how buildings actually functioned. Luxury malls had hidden such systems to preserve magic. We displayed them to show whose work created comfort. Neither of us arrived as the other's guest. She returned the brass key. I told her it had belonged to the future we planned. She said the future had opened without her. I answered that some doors led to different rooms than expected. She apologized, not for choosing wealth, for humiliating me publicly because she wanted her new choice to appear certain. The final system projection frightened me because every number looked helpful. It predicted which employee might resign, which friend would remain loyal, and how Erin's trust changed after disagreements. Used carefully, the information could prevent mistakes. Used continuously, it would make genuine uncertainty feel like irresponsible management. I accepted the apology. I did not ask her to return. The system remained open. Erin and I continued working late together. Erin did not become easier to impress after we began dating. When financial magazines praised me as visionary, she highlighted forecasts that had succeeded because teams corrected my assumptions. When projects failed, she refused to let me hide behind collective responsibility. Affection increased the standard she applied to me instead of lowering it. She challenged every acquisition that seemed motivated by pride. I challenged her belief that every emotional decision was financially suspicious. Our arguments became the most reliable part of First Door's governance. Daeho claimed we were dating 6 months before either of us admitted it. Before selecting termination, I exported every legal record and ordinary analysis our companies required. The system refused to export supernatural valuations. That limitation comforted me. First Door would retain evidence, contracts, and institutions, but not an oracle. Everyone who came after me would need to listen rather than simply consult my private advantage. Sora opened a prediction market among employees. Erin discovered it and made her donate the winnings to the Stability Fund. Our first real date occurred at a 24-hour soup restaurant after a lender meeting. Erin brought 3 risk reports. I made her leave 2 in the car. She said compromise was already damaging our standards. I said the date had not officially started until she stopped calculating my debt capacity. She smiled and closed the final folder. The day after the system vanished, markets moved against one of our projects and I felt panic rise. For years, hidden information had made uncertainty manageable. Erin refused to comfort me with false confidence. She gathered the team, reviewed what we knew, and allowed the decision to remain difficult. The company survived without certainty. The true value system reacted. Personal relationship detected. No valuation available. I considered that its most intelligent message. 2 years later, First Door's assets exceeded 10 trillion won. Most belonged to pension funds, employees, cooperatives, and public investors. My personal stake made me one of Korea's youngest billionaires. The title still felt unreal when I returned home and found Sora using my financial magazine cover beneath a leaking plant pot. My proposal at Daeho's workshop was interrupted twice by customers collecting repaired speakers. Erin waited while Daeho argued over an invoice and Sora pretended not to record from behind a shelf. Nothing resembled the public spectacle where Nayeon left me. That imperfection made the answer feel private and real. Professor Ma was convicted of document fraud and ordered to return his hidden night glass earnings. The university created an independent student invention office. I funded it only after students received board seats and the right to publish disputes. Heliox engineers improved my original model beyond anything I could have built alone. My name remained on the patent. Their names appeared beside mine. Chairman Kwon completed the restructuring investigation and resigned from every family foundation. He spent his remaining time documenting how false valuations had spread through the group. The marriage agreement Erin and I signed separated our assets and prohibited either company from guaranteeing the other's obligations. News commentators called it cold. We considered it affectionate. Neither of us wanted personal love to become a hidden financial risk carried by employees, investors, or communities who had never joined our marriage. His report became required reading in several business schools. Min-jae worked for a turnaround firm in Vietnam after no Korean company wanted the publicity risk. He began as an analyst. For the first time, his title described work he actually performed. Nayeon built the Supplier Association into a national organization. We saw each other at conferences and spoke without pretending our history had become pleasant. She eventually married a schoolteacher who refused to attend luxury galas. Sora said the universe possessed a sense of humor. At the wedding, Meridian workers sat beside Heliox engineers, former Kwanseong vendors, university students, and retired pension representatives. The guest list looked less like a billionaire ceremony than a meeting of everyone who had rebuilt the road toward it. The most expensive object in the room was Daeho's sound console, which still misbehaved. I said happiness was not a punishment or reward distributed according to my heartbreak. Erin heard me and said I had finally learned one sentence without a system explaining it. On the 5th anniversary of the gala, Crown Meridian hosted the opening of Nova Ground's Central Market. The underground thermal network powered cold storage, apartments, clinics, and workshops. Former department store employees owned shares in the project. Small vendors occupied the best entrances instead of being hidden on upper floors. A display near the service corridor showed the original damaged refrigeration controller from the night my life changed. The plaque contained no story about heartbreak. Minji's message did not erase what he had done. It showed he could finally joke about an image that once controlled him. I replied with a photograph of Daeho adjusting my inexpensive watch before the ceremony. Min-jae answered that at least mine was paid for. The exchange ended there. It explained how one technician prevented food waste during a system failure. That description mattered more to me. The true value system appeared one final time. Distortion removed. Asset ownership verified. Dependence on external valuation below threshold. System termination available. It offered to remain active. The option to retain the system included no immediate penalty. That made the choice harder. It promised cleaner investments, earlier warnings, and protection from people who might lie again. I realized fear was the strongest argument for permanent surveillance. The same insecurity that once made me cling to Nayeon could now make me cling to impossible certainty. After the wedding, Erin continued overruling me in audit meetings. I continued refusing some of her most cautious recommendations. Marriage did not resolve disagreement. It removed the temptation to interpret disagreement as abandonment. We learned that staying together required less certainty than the system had once offered. With it, I could continue seeing hidden debts, false ownership, and undervalued companies before anyone else. I could become richer than nations. I asked what continued use would cost. The system displayed a projection of every relationship becoming another ledger. Aaron's loyalty would become probability. Sora's trust would become an asset. Employees' respect would become retention value. Love, friendship, and grief would become numbers waiting to be optimized. People visiting First Door often asked to see the interface that made me rich. I told them it no longer existed. Some assumed I was protecting a secret technology. Others believed the entire story was marketing. I eventually stopped correcting them. Institutions should not depend on everyone believing the founder's miracle. The system had saved me by removing one false valuation. Keeping it forever would create another. I selected termination. The black ledger folded into a single line. True value cannot be seen only from above. Then it disappeared. I expected fear. Instead, I felt ordinary. The brass key remained inside a small frame near our office entrance. Beneath it, Sora added a note saying that symbolic keys did not work on electronic locks. Aaron refused to remove the note because accurate disclosures were company policy. Visitors photographed it more often than the financial awards beside it. Aaron found me standing beside the old controller. She asked whether the system had shown another hidden empire. I told her it was gone. She asked whether our companies would survive without impossible information. I looked through the glass at engineers, vendors, drivers, accountants, and neighborhood representatives arguing over operating schedules. I said they had already survived every decision I made with it. The best thing the system ever revealed was how much value existed outside me. Aaron took the brass key from my pocket. I sometimes imagine the easier ending. Exposing Min Jae at the gala, winning Neon back, purchasing Kwanseong, and proving every person wrong through visible luxury. The fantasy remained emotionally satisfying for about 30 seconds. Then I remembered the thousands of employees who would become scenery in a revenge story they never chose. I had carried it again that day without planning to. She asked whether it still opened anything. I said the first office door at First Door Capital used an electronic lock. She called that poor branding. 6 months later, I proposed to her inside Daeho's workshop. There was no ballroom, no audience, and no live stream. The ring was modest because Aaron had threatened to audit any purchase that looked emotionally inefficient. I placed the brass key beside it. The night I became a paper billionaire, I believed wealth would finally prevent anyone from measuring me as inadequate. Years later, I understood that no amount of ownership could control another person's judgment. Freedom came from allowing judgment to exist without treating it as an invoice I had to pay. She asked whether I expected her to accept a symbol from another relationship. I told her the key no longer represented Neon. It represented the first future I imagined before learning that doors could close. Aaron said that answer was dangerously sentimental. Then she accepted. Our wedding took place at Nova Grounds Community Hall. Meridian vendors provided everything through transparent contracts. Daeho controlled the sound system and still produced feedback during my vows. Aaron eventually asked whether heartbreak had truly activated the system or merely made me willing to notice it. I had no answer. Perhaps the ledger had always been waiting for a moment when one false valuation became impossible to defend. Either way, pain opened the account, but it did not deserve credit for everything built afterward. Sora charged guests for access to embarrassing childhood photographs and invested the money in employee shares. Neon attended with her husband and sat beside supplier representatives. Min-jae sent a short message from Vietnam. It said, "Congratulations. No borrowed watch this time." I laughed harder than I expected. People continued telling my story as if one public breakup activated a machine that made me a billionaire overnight. That version fit thumbnails and headlines. It was also incomplete. First Door's annual report eventually listed true value risks alongside financial ones. Hidden worker knowledge, concentrated decision rights, unpaid community costs, and reputational assets unsupported by operations. Regulators adopted parts of the framework. The language came from lessons a supernatural ledger displayed, but the measurements came from people willing to provide evidence. The system did not create my invention. It did not recover server logs, confront my professor, rebuild malls, protect deposits, or convince workers to reclaim their votes. It showed me where false value had been placed. By then, the companies had written processes for nearly everything the ledger once revealed: ownership reviews, liability maps, worker data rights, public deposit tracking, and independent challenge panels. None predicted the future perfectly. They did something more important. They allowed people without supernatural access to question the version of value presented by those already in control. Everything after that required people willing to replace appearance with evidence. Neon left me for a rich boy. The rich boy was bankrupt. I became wealthier than both of them imagined. None of those facts became the most important part of my life. When Sora asked which night changed my life, I no longer chose the breakup. I chose the night she transferred 40,000 won without demanding proof that I would succeed. The system revealed claims worth trillions, but her small transfer was the first capital offered on trust rather than appearance. The important part was that humiliation stopped being the price I used to calculate myself. The night I became a billionaire, my account was nearly empty. The morning I became free, the system vanished. Those were not the same event.